things. You didn't get the memo.
All right, it is 12:19 and we are here for a budget workshop. With that, we'll turn it over to, you have a microphone? All right, go ahead, Director.
All righty, Matt Zoller here, Recreation Director for Bonner County, here to discuss the Priest Lake Snowmobile Budget, Org 036. Today we have the Priest Lake Groomer Board here and the state of Idaho representing for this program. We started this budget last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, and we did not finish it, and there were a couple questions. The first question was if we were going to make this a forward-paying program, how did we get our estimates for that? So just for your guys' information, this isn't just spitballing. So the state actually has their distribution numbers. They won't truly know that exact number until July 1st. But we have, if you guys want copies and want to go through with the calculator and find the same answers I did, then that's how I came to that number. So this isn't just smoke and mirrors. These are real numbers of what we have currently up to date with sticker sales, and that's how we're making this prediction for the following year if we can go to a forward-paying program. So just wanted to clarify that. That was a question from last time.
So the state has a cutoff date, and at that point, you'll have the actual numbers in July for future projection for the coming year.
Yeah, so in July, we'll get the solid numbers and a signed copy to then distribute officially to everybody. But until then, it's just what we have of this last season from July 2024 up until May 2025, so.
Thank you.
And then one of the other items that we discussed was the snowmobile donation. So Larry here talks to Piper Shores the most, and he's also the chair of our groomer board, just a heads up. So he confirmed with Piper Shores, Sandpiper Shores, this morning?
Yes.
He confirmed?
Yeah, they confirmed their $1,500, I don't know if it's really a donation, it's really, they're paying for plowing, so that's their contribution for plowing, yeah.
So that was one of the other items.
Can I ask, if you're saying contribution for plowing, it's because we're providing them a service and that's what they're paying the $1,500 for?
Yes.
Because they're receiving a service?
Yes.
So then we shouldn't identify that as a donation. We should title that differently then.
So if you would like, we can change that line item so we can move 5483 snowmobile donation, and we can actually increase the contracts miscellaneous, the 8750. So that's where that number increased from last year. It was $7,000, and then we just kept it at 55 because of the way the donation was. But if it makes more sense to you guys, what we'll do is we'll just increase 8750 contracts miscellaneous, which does pay for our snow plowing up there, and we'll just keep that at $7,000, and then we'll just remove the $1,500 donation line.
Do you have a contract line? I can't remember when I was scanning through.
Yes, contracts miscellaneous. That's the 8750 I was just speaking about.
So without the word miscellaneous in there?
Well, it's just because it doesn't fall under one of the other specific contract subcategories.
Okay.
So if the total expense for the snow plowing is $7,000, then yes, that expense should be listed at $7,000. The $1,500 on the offset could be posted to miscellaneous revenue. Either way. Yep. But you would still account for it on the revenue side that you expect to receive the $1,500 and that you're increasing your expense line by the same amount to show the in and the out.
Yep.
Yeah, so if you could just add notes to those lines
Sure.
to show where the dollars are coming and going
Sure.
for, that'd be great.
Yep. And then one of the other line items in question was 6720 small assets and equipment. We have that set aside for $1,000. Now, historically, we haven't spent that line. And I think a lot of that is going to be just the way the program was run in the past. What we'd like to do is have that line available to us this year. Dave here is one of our groomer operation leads, and so he is looking to buy, I believe, a new floor jack, some power tools, replace some batteries this year. So what we have figured out is approximately literally $1,000. Yeah, 1/2-inch impact batteries, $200 per battery. We're just going to get one, and then a floor jack is about $500 for one that would be appropriate for the size we need.
So this is to perform preventative maintenance on the groomer.
Maintenance on groomers, like putting on new bogey wheels and all those things.
So, yeah, I mean, that sounds reasonable to me. So if the director just adds that breakdown of costs into that line item, then I think we have the justification for that expenditure.
Okay.
Yep, so that was kind of what we came down to, is that we need to have the ability to have that. Yeah, battery $200, a floor jack was $500, and an impact gun was $350.
Thanks for getting the numbers for that.
Yep.
Should we actually make that
So
Yeah, so
I
550?
I want to add, on this one, this is for things that are known, and so do we want to give a cushion for something to occur that's unknown when it comes to this type of equipment? Because I
Yeah.
kind of think we might not want to be exact on 1,000 on that.
Well,
When the expected expenses,
I-
1050 as it is.
yeah, I think we should make it the 1050 because they have identified specific items. But then, like we've done with other departments, I think we should go to the miscellaneous line item and create an actual contingency in that line item.
Okay,
Does
yeah, that
Because
works.
that would be consistent with what we've done with other departments.
Instead of padding every line.
Right, we've tried to say if we know we have anticipated costs in a particular line, let's identify what those are and have the line value be appropriate to those items, and then let's build contingency in a direct line item, which is called miscellaneous, because we really truly don't know what it's going to be used for.
Yeah, it's pretty hard. Like I said, these are $300,000 machines that
Things will come up.
nickel and dime you.
These guys have been using their own personal stuff to maintain it, and
Understood.
I just,
That's
as
not
a
our
state,
intent.
we don't, we want them to have their own stuff, so.
Yes, we agree.
So, you just mentioned 1050. Is that what the total comes up to for their tools?
Yeah, they had 200 for a battery, 350 for the impact driver, and $500 for the floor jack, so that's.
So that's
Did we miss
1,000.
something?
1050.
Was there one other item, or were
200
those the
plus
items?
350 plus
Oh,
500.
350, I heard. Okay, so I would suggest making that line item like 1,100 then,
Okay.
or 1,150, just to make sure we cover taxes or whatever.
We should be paying taxes.
Oh, okay,
I think the reason when I look at some of these
I do.
lines, instead of on some of them just putting it miscellaneous, so that we don't get in the bad habit of saying, I have extra funds in that box, that this one, because we're trying to tell people to stay in that line, similar to how we did with gas. We actually increased by a percentage in the gas line. And so when I look at the specialty tools, it makes me wonder, should we increase for a little bit of a buffer only related to small assets and equipment, so that you're earmarking it, so that you're not sliding into the, I'll just spend it for whatever.
No, I
Because
see
I
what you're
feel like
saying.
there's opportunity for their type of equipment to actually need more than what they've identified.
Right.
And if we give a cushion solely for that purpose, it addresses the goal of our board of staying in that line and not money that just floats.
Pulling out a contingency.
No, I see your point. I
Yeah.
could see a couple $100 for consumables and small parts, right? Because you're going to have fluids and you're going to buy, quantities of 10 to 100 small parts that are going to get sheared off,
Well, you
replaced.
mentioned even, like I said, we do have blue shop towels and toilet paper that we supply to both bromine huts and other miscellaneous, and all of a sudden we might be missing an axe or something like that, that somebody borrowed from one of the working. Those kind of things, so. We did even 2 years ago, got 2 new electric chainsaws that we carry on board along with our gas powered, Dave Spencer, on operations, and so those cost us well in the range of about $800 just for those two chainsaws, smaller Milwaukees. Last year, we just bought two new little short pruner ones. But what we looked at more was for the efficiency, for the operator. It's taking him time to pull out a gas chainsaw, start it up and stuff. This has proved to be very valuable for our operators, grooming rather than cutting.
So can I ask, would we be agreeable to increase their, oh, you just had the number I was gonna ask. Is the board okay to put it at 1,300 in that particular line?
I am. Yeah, I'm
Commissioner
good.
Galke? And so I'm only drawing attention to this because it is most unfortunate for you, but we have a hearing that's right up, so I want to hopefully get through your budget because this will be like the third time you've had to come over here.
Yep. Yeah, and if we don't get to the Sandpoint Groomer budget, that's okay. We'll just reschedule another workshop. But this is kind of important. Like I said, this board is very passionate. We're lucky that they have a 501c3 aspect of this organization. So they have been covering a lot of these tools and purchases out of their own accounts. And
Okay.
so anyways, and then one of the other things you guys had a question on was, this is the big ticket item, is the bumping up the contingency account, the 7,700 line item, and we're going from $1,838 to $10,000. And so we have money in the bank that we would like access to during heavier snowfall years. And I'll let Larry kind of jump in here and just kind of discuss kind of the mission statement of the Groomers and just kind of showing that although we've had ability to spend more money in the past, that we've always operated within the money received from the state.
Can I actually ask something different? Because I think if we spend time on that kind of dissertation, we won't get through the budget.
Okay.
And I think you guys can make an argument for your gasoline without doing that because we're gonna run out of time. And our schedule is hard to get back into. So I'd like to push us for just telling us what you want on the budget itself.
Okay.
And then if we have a question, then we'll ask that question. Is that okay?
Sure. So line 7,700, we'd like to increase from $1,838 to $10,000.
And can you do a brief description of what types of costs normally get covered out of this line?
Well, if you think of the last 2 years that we've had here, and by the way, I've been snowmobiling at Priest Lake for over 50 years, which is kind of a scary number. But this is what I do, and I still snowmobile. But in my experience, the last 2 years, and probably you witnessed this, was the most unusual winters we've ever had. And so if we look at historically what we've done to operate the last 2 years, we actually operated probably at 70% of normal. So if we have a terrible winter, for us, that's a good winter, okay? And so part of our constituency is that there's an expectation that they want us to groom. And so if we have the opportunity, we have a good winter, we're going to operate 13 weeks. So 13 weeks, we're grooming 400 miles of trail. We got two groomers, we operate on the both sides. And so if we do that at capacity, we're going to run out of money. And if we run out of money, what's going to happen is we're going to have folks that are not happy with really what our mission is to provide this good snowmobiling for people. If we run out of money, it's going to trickle down to the point that they're going to stop buying registrations. So it's important that we do that. So if we have 100% year, all of a sudden, we're going to need more operations money. We've been operating less because we had weeks last year that we didn't even groom at all.
What was
So
the
what-
year where you were at most capacities to look at a comparison of what was in that line?
What year?
Yeah.
That we had a
Probably
bad
3 years
winter.
ago.
Well, what I'm trying to understand is, I understand that we have seasonal fluctuations and it changes operational costs, but this is a contingency line. What I'm trying to understand is what are these dollars from the contingency line being spent on? Is it to buy fuel?
They're going to be fuel and labor primarily.
Because I'd rather, we're trying to be more specific with the budget.
Diesel, we did run right close to, Larry, on that, and so we only ran about 65-70% of that last year.
So I'm not disagreeing with, it would likely make sense to increase the line for the idea of having a heavier snowfall season. I'm just trying to understand, does it make more sense to increase the gasoline and diesel lines and other, that's what I want to clarify.
And so the exact reason we're shooting for contingency instead of increasing the fuel and salary lines is we are trying to not drain our savings. So what we're trying to do is operate within our predictions and model that they have. So the model that they have currently has our fuel lines appropriate. And so with the contingency is we're asking to have access to money we already have in the bank. It's kind of like, I guess the question for the state is, do you guys find it appropriate that we have the ability to spend contingency money in a heavy snow year?
Yes, we do. It's variable, and honestly, if they don't groom, that's pretty bad on our part. It looks bad. It makes users not want to participate in our program, and it's just best to have that money just in case, because you never know.
There's options within the fiscal year to actually address that. So we have an answer of if we go 3 years ago, what did that fund use?
So last year was the highest use in this particular GL line at
Mhm.
3119 because they paid for half of the heater repair. I think that, yes, we can look at it a couple of different ways, right? You can either allocate this. I added a note that it would only be used in a heavy snowfall year. I think the intent is that they would have it available if they needed it, but if it doesn't need to be used, it would just roll to the next budget year.
100%.
That's what I was wondering. It's not
And
a yearly
But to
$10,000
Asia's
budget.
point, there are other mechanisms that the county has available. If the cash is in the bank, the commissioners could, rather than pull it out of the general fund contingency, open their budget and allow them to pull in additional cash as needed, as long as they have it.
And in part, when you're looking at from the way that we've been doing these budgets, it's to allow for that miscellaneous line, but in this case, to just inject, because that's a significant increase from $18,000 to $10,000, and it's dependent on something we can't control. So the option of the director on all of that is, the budget needs to be opened up in order to address that issue, and then inject the funds necessary to ensure that we're meeting that expectation. So for us, and I don't agree with not putting it in gasoline. If we know that gasoline is a driving cost, then it should be, that's how we reflect that particular line, not that we increase a miscellaneous contingent. And we've been trying to do that by giving about a 10 to 15% increase to address fluctuations in costs associated with something we're not in control of. So outside of gas, because there's a line item for gas, what else would you use that line for?
Sure.
Talk about that.
Yeah, one of the, last year we spent, I forget what the number was in snow plowing, and we had a very mild year. And so, because, Bonner County plows up to just about Lionhead, I think they're doing probably 70 miles of plowing from Dick and Sheet Road up to the road stops. And there's 2.5 miles from there to Sandpiper Shores, as well as our snowmobile parking lot. So that's what we have to pay for. We have to provide access to our parking areas.
How much do you estimate that you paid in the past for that?
Well,
We just paid $5,000 this last year, but they did not have to snowplow.
they hardly plowed.
So we figured 7,500 to 8,500 is gonna be,
Is that in a contract?
we contract out, it's just on as they do it.
Per plow.
But is it a contract that you have of the specific person that comes and charges you a specific rate?
Yes, yes.
So then that can also live in the contract line.
So you would like to see the $10,000, as much as they really can say is needed, distributed between fuel,
In the correct
diesel,
lines.
and contracts?
Yes.
Okay.
Because that allows us to track, and then when you go back to your next budget cycle, then you're looking at the historical need and the waxing and waning of the individual lines, and we can better assess what percentage of increase. But if we were to just give a budget a dollar amount and said, spend it on we can't track it that way, but we can track the increase in gas costs, we can track the contract issue, and then leave something that's truly miscellaneous of unanticipated event. That number should be small because we should have worked really hard to itemize the others. So for me, I would like to see the gas go in the gas and that contract for for plowing go into the contract field. And that way we're also managing contracts, which was one of our questions on some boards of how often do we go out and look to see if someone will offer a better rate for some services or things like that.
But in general, budget philosophy wise, I'll use Road and Bridge as an example. They request, and we have agreed that they need to budget for a heavy snow year. Right? It doesn't matter that last winter was a light snow winter. They have to budget for next year to be a heavy snowfall. Otherwise, we could really get in trouble if we didn't account for that potential. So I hear you asking for the same thing, and I'm completely in support of that. That makes sense. We just want to build it into the right locations in the budget.
And just, I don't want to spend a bunch of time talking unnecessarily, but just so you know, I'm kind of known as Mr. Frugal. And I think you people are probably kind of like frugals also. We're in the same club, right? And so we look at everything. And the reason that we have a reserve account is because of our frugality. I mean, we did this through the years. We never, I mean, everybody on my board is all over, let's figure out a way to do it cheaper. And just because it's there, even if it's in a contingency account or whatever you want to call it, we're not going to say, well, we got that money left over, let's go blow it. We are real concerned about taking care of the money that we receive from the state of Idaho, just like I think we share this. And so, believe me, we are not needlessly going to be spending money. And just the other point is, we have a volunteer group of folks. Collectively, we put hundreds of hours in for free.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing all the maintenance and repairs and might be 25 miles from our shop, and we're out there on the trail in 3 feet of snow and change bogey wheels. These people are all dedicated. We want to really support this grooming program. We're pretty excited about it. And of course, me personally, I remember the day when there was no such thing as a groomer. So it's an amazing group of people, and we're going to collectively take very good care and preserve these funds. And so we're sharing the same, I think, the same interest that you're looking for.
So outside of gasoline in the contracts, what would that line be used for? Because we've identified where those increases can live. So what else would we use that line for?
Maintenance and repair potentially. And I'm just going to pitch this one more
Can
time.
we pause a second? Do we have a maintenance and repair line?
70-40.
So if there's a line, we need to address it in the line. But for what this particular line is called, what would we use that money for that doesn't exist? Or you might need to create a line too because you can identify something.
So I'll say that on our 2019, which is our older one, which we've got a newer one coming, hopefully. And so we're getting rid of the 2016, which was our headache. We were putting $5,000 to $10,000 into the 2016, trying to keep it running. That one's going, we got the new one coming. The 2019, though, we just recognized bogey wheels are like tires on your guys' trucks out there. They wear out. I just ordered 3 new ones, which they have 16 on them. And instead of $575 from Tucker, we were able to get them out of Colorado refurbished, and they were like $370 a piece. That's not 16, that's only 3. And they will tear, rip, so we're putting those out. So the other, that is probably, I think we're okay in the maintenance, as you're saying, Asia, the 9,000, because now that we've got the newer machine, we will be putting maintenance, I'm sure, into the 19, because it's older. The only other thing I'd like to recognize, as you're saying gas, I'll just.
Can I pause you
recognize
for a second
diesel.
though? We were on the contingency line. So that, because your tires can go into the miscellaneous or the vehicle repair
The
line.
bogey wheels.
So my question is, what would the contingency line be used for? And it sounds like we don't need a contingency line because tires have a line for it, we have a line for gas, and we have a line for contracts. So we don't need the contingency line because we can identify what we need to spend those on, and they have lines.
And labor, right?
And labor.
Yeah.
And labor.
So
Sorry, one more pitch if you're ready for me to talk.
So I
We're
have a
not
quick
gonna make it
question.
through if we tell more stories.
This isn't a story. I'm just explaining why this should live in contingency and not in other line items.
And that's my question was, do you see a reason why we shouldn't do it this way?
Yes.
Because I'm seeing some resistance. So it's like, why, what are you thinking?
So here's my reason for resistance, and the state and the board can correct me otherwise. The reason is as we look at making this program sustainable and we're going to make it a forward-paying program, this budget, the way the line items are set currently, is with the anticipated funds that are rolling forward. Now, the reason is we would like to keep those separate line items separate so we can track our budget easier. And if those go over, then we know once we hit the contingency line, we've blown through the user fees and then we're going to bank money. And that's why it's important to have this in contingency, is knowing once we hit contingency, we are not spending user fees, we are spending bank money.
So you're trying to separate.
Yes, trying to keep it separated. All these other line items, the way we have it set up with what's predicted, is we would like to keep them as is based on what the model is. And we'd like to know that once we start diving into contingency, we are through our user fees and we're going to the bank. And that's why I'd like to keep them separate and not into line items individually. I understand, but it's more of a tracking thing.
Okay. I'm not agreeable
It's
to
an
not
awkward
tracking the
accounting
line,
method.
so I'm not agreeable to that method of managing a budget. I think it's more work to do it out of your line, but it allows the board to track what we're spending in the department, and part of what this county has done historically is, for some lines, people just spend out of their lines, and because it's not attached to something. And part of looking at our budgets by looking at a zero-based perspective is we're saying justify the line. And so there isn't a justification for the line when the answer is just so that it's easier to track when we have hit, a different form of payment because we're out of the user fee. If it's a gas line, it needs to be a gas line. I think that there's an argument for a miscellaneous category, but you can identify where the money needs to be spent, so it should be spent, and we should be looking at then what is your projected budget, and is the budget we created after we looked at what we needed to do in line with what your projection is. And then you would then be accountable to track when you go over what you anticipate based on those fees, not essentially making this a larger line that allows for easier tracking, because it's easier in one way, but it's not necessarily easier on the idea of really understanding how much are we spending on the items that you can identify and planning for the potential increase that might exist with gas.
And with the knowledge that if we, for whatever reason, necessary reason, obviously, go over budget, then when we go over budget, then those funds would come out of our $108,000 reserve that we have, that we've already saved and
Yeah.
and booked, and that's where it would come from.
And that's where you can come before the board and say, we need to open to put money into that account too, if there's an issue.
And I think that's probably one of the reasons why we're trying to do this, is that it could be a little cumbersome to, let's say, on February 15th, we got to run in and go to the board so we can continue grooming for the next month if we run out. And so we're just trying to make it a little easier for us and as well as the commission.
And we're, from a board perspective, we're also trying to put more focus on directors watching their budgets regularly so that we have those update meetings where they're saying, this is the percentage, and that's something that you can work on with the clerk's office, because they'll tell you when your budget is running hot and give you that notification. And so that we can, if we're managing our budget from a director level, we should catch it before it's an issue. There should be an expectation of, once I hit this particular percentage, I should be addressing the issue of there's a probability that we're going to go over budget before we get there.
We review the budget every 2 weeks. We
Yeah.
meet the first and third week of each
Yeah.
month, and our board goes through the budget. We're on top of it, and these folks are doing an amazing job
Yeah.
providing that information to us.
And I can appreciate that, in the middle of the season, right? Yeah, it's difficult to have lag time if you have a budget issue. And so, right, in my mind, it's two things. One, it's using good accounting principles and practices, which is why I think if we know that the costs are going to be in certain fuel line items and maintenance and things of that, we should put it in those line items. Now it's accessible and available in the approved budget, and we should have some amount of contingency. But if we can identify that we would anticipate in what I'll call a good snow year, this is what it's going to really cost, and I think that's what the line item value should be. And just try to use it as a traditional budgeting method as much as possible, but have some contingency there so that there isn't a time lag if something comes up, since you guys have actually already, through good stewardship, created an account of reserve funds.
We're real fortunate.
So it makes sense in my mind to have some amount of contingency sitting there so that you have rapid access to address something that comes up and you have to be able to do a rapid response.
Do you, either of you guys remember, there was a year when, I want to say that out there was, I want to say maybe it was a propane fill where it happened at a period of time where there was an issue, and for some reason I thought the bill was like $8,000, and we weren't expecting to receive a bill based on when they filled the tank up. Where does
Right at
that,
the end of the season, we came to the commission and I think we received $10,000.
so is,
And what happened,
before you go over what happened,
Go ahead.
is that a reasonable item? Does that live somewhere in the budget? Or is that something that you would use the contingency? Because if I remember, if there was an issue of when money was going to hit an account, but the bill needed to be paid. And that's something that you might identify as earmarking something for that, because it had to do with part of when they could deliver that item and when the payment was due. But I can't remember which year that happened in.
I think it was 2 years ago, end of the season 2 years ago,
Does that
that it occurred.
Does that live elsewhere in the budget? So maybe that's, so we don't have that, was it propane? Was I right on the propane, or was it
I think
gas?
it was diesel.
Yeah, and I don't really find this relevant. I guess the big thing is say we do increase our other individual line items. I guess the question for the commissioners is, are we going to start using general fund dollars to prop up the snow program, or is this still falling back onto the $108,000 that we have access to? Because that's going to be one of the bigger, I guess, talking points is like, is the county comfortable or willing to use general fund dollars to move this program along, versus if we're only using our own funds, then I think it's appropriate that we'd have access to a larger contingency than $1,800. Maybe you guys don't feel like 10,000 is appropriate, but we could maybe cut that down to 5,000. But that's the big question I have for you guys right now is, are you looking to use general fund dollars to prop up the lack of snow funding from users if it were to happen?
So I kind of think, in my opinion, what we're discussing, maybe we're not on the same page, but we need to bring that contingency amount down. I think we would all kind of agree on that, to maybe $5,000, right?
Sure.
But then prop up other line items like gas and diesel. Prop up diesel, bump that up $2,000 or $2,500. And your wheel budget, your tire budget, bump that one up $1,500 to help take care of the bogey wheels, to where you have the same amount of money accessible, but in the more correct line items, instead of just saying, hey, I'm just going to pull out my savings account whenever I need money.
Sure.
So I think that's where we're all at.
Yeah, I think that's what we've been saying for a bit.
Yeah.
We just want to put the money in the right place because that's what we really anticipate the funds being spent on.
Okay.
It's not that we're trying to,
Yeah, just reallocate it.
Well, and
Right.
largely, this is a fee-based program too, and that's largely where the funding has to come from, not from the general fund. And that doesn't mean you don't use an injection to build up some of those lines, but it should be mainly fee-based. So I do want to go back to the contingency question, because if that bill that I'm referencing doesn't have a place to live, that caused a problem for the groomers because it had to do with when we had to cut that check. And so that might be a reasonable item to put in that contingency line for that fill because it's all at once and I can't remember what happened.
I'll take a look and dig into it and see kind of what the situation was and whether or not it should have been properly
Because I think we
budgeted
did an
for.
emergency to open their budget to put that money in to pay that bill.
Okay.
Because I think there was something about the bill needed to be paid as soon as the fill was completed. And if that's not budgeted for, that might be where we could make that live.
Okay, so moving forward with the new idea of contingency, would you guys be agreeable to put the contingency at $5,000 and then do $2,500 for diesel and then $2,500 for labor? Because that's going to be what happens is heavy snow year, we're going to have more labor and more fuel. It's kind of hand in hand.
Those are the two big tickets.
So that's, I think working together is we could agree is that we need $10,000. I'm tracking what you're saying here. Let's drop the contingency line item down to $5,000 and then let's bump up $2,500 in diesel and $2,500 in labor.
So I would like to go line by line and address them as they pop up. I would like confirmation on what did the diesel issue that occurred, was that budgeted for in already the gas line, or did we use that contingency line? Because the line hasn't been used at that. And so clearly stating, do we need contingency or is there a miscellaneous line that would address it? Because if we didn't budget for the thing I'm referencing, that should be budgeted for. I just remember there was a problem with that.
The biggest problem that year was that we were told by the county commissioners, don't hesitate, get out and groom, okay? There was no limitation whatsoever. And then the combination was that we did not have good budget information. And so 2 weeks before the end of the season, according to the budget report that we received from the county, it actually showed that we had $18,000 left in our budget. 2 weeks later, we were $10,000 over budget. So we had very poor information. In fact, we were just absolutely shocked. Our final meeting, we did a flip chart, we went through the whole thing, and it's like, how did this happen? And so we had poor information. I think those corrections have been made now. We can actually sit and track, but that was the situation that we had a boom year. We had a terrible winter, which was a good winter for us. We did a lot of grooming, and we groomed. We kept all of our constituents really happy. They thought it was the best ever, okay? And so then we all of a sudden had this overrun. And then we had to go to the county commission, and they actually gave us $10,000 to cover those costs. And I guess the tipping point was the fuel cost at the last. We refuel it costs almost $10,000 when we refuel our tanks. Oh, excuse me, $15,000.
So to answer your question on that, that was actually on the budget report. It was not accurately adding up correctly, because I caught that at the meeting. And that's when it was corrected, because Pete was there at the time, called, and for some reason on your budget, on the municipal thing, was not adding up correctly. That's where that came into
Okay.
place.
I just remember it was a panic.
That was a panic attack.
And we were, we all want to avoid that.
Yeah, and
We don't want that.
so that's what I was trying to look at. So what's our next line?
So I think if you're looking at line to line item, can I also just kind of add in there, because you have on there state unemployment, line number 6,200, 0. So if you guys are looking at line to line item, year before last, it was like 738, it was like approximately $100 last year,
And it shows 0.
and it shows 0. So if you're gonna watch line by line, I think you guys need to put in something in there.
I'm not sure if there's ever money that goes out at every single.
It's not something that would be budgeted for in your B and C budgets. That's something that would be allocated in HR. So auditing will take a look at those lines and adjust that.
Yeah. Because there was money about March when it was added in.
Good point.
Just watching line to line.
Yes, it's a good point. Thank
Can I
you.
ask the board on line item 7,700, did we agree on 5,000? Is that where we're at, or?
We
is that-
didn't give a dollar amount. They were gonna research where the propane lived. I have a question for the board. Their hearing ends at 1 o'clock and we have a planning at 1:30. Does the board want to continue a little bit longer on this budget?
A few, 10 minutes, 15 maybe.
So
at
can we
max.
do,
Break
agree
between
to
the
a,
two.
there needs to be a break between the two because we've been sitting here all day. So how about the stop at 1:15? Is that okay?
I agree.
All right. So what's your next line item, Jessica?
After contingency was miscellaneous.
7860.
So what are some of the actual items that have been purchased out of the miscellaneous line?
And let's see here. Yeah, we'd have to go back through our bills to see what we spent it on. But I'm assuming it'd be probably shop towels, supplies, oil, hydraulic, cleaning supplies.
Window washer fluids, I think.
Oh, so that's for hydraulic hoses, and then, yeah, we needed something from Sandpoint Building Supplies.
So do you have a facilities line item?
No,
I think it was that the year that picnic tables were built.
But that wouldn't have been so.
Oh, so.
that's a whole different budget. That's a whole different part
I
of the
remember,
program.
wood
Different
was
budget.
purchased, and I remember that was picnic tables, because we got a lot of comments on building picnic tables.
I'm just wondering I'm wondering if there needs to be a facilities line item because you guys have actual facilities costs that you're incurring. And so our whole thing is if we can identify it and we know it's going to be a cost, it's not miscellaneous. Miscellaneous is something we really just can't identify. It's
I feel like the hydraulics and stuff should be under the vehicle repairs.
I agree.
That line may have been full, and that's why I used.
Right, which is why we're not accounting like that anymore.
yeah.
So if we create that line so it lives where it goes, what else as miscellaneous? Because on some of the items, we already allocated for kind of the unanticipated vehicle repair items. So if that's what that line is, it looks like we can eliminate that line.
Yeah, because there's a true contingency line, so I don't think we would need the miscellaneous though.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It's a redundant thing.
Yeah. Most other budgets don't have a specific contingency line, so we use miscellaneous to create contingency.
Yep.
But because you have a contingency line, I don't think we need the miscellaneous, we just
Yep.
move those costs where they should be.
This 1,250 to our contingency line.
No, we're gonna add it to
So-
the proper lines,
So,
such as maintenance and facilities and where it needs to go.
So on
Is
the
the
miscellaneous,
contract.
I'll also kind of mention is like we do about every 2-3 years, we'll do a full annual on both machines. Luckily this year, again, 2016 Groomer is going away, so we didn't do that. But I think we spent about $1,500 on oils and fluids, transmissions and everything else, which we do all the labor.
And so that should be in that vehicle repair line.
So-
And then when you're given that text, explain, this is what it costs to do the full service
Yeah.
of the dollar amount, so it justifies the number.
Yep.
So if you're spending $1,500 in every 3 years, wouldn't it be right just to budget $500 per year into
But
that line?
just like I said, a hydraulic line, we had to run in and we blew two and they're about $250 to $400 put on the special fittings and such. And then we lose hydraulic fluid, which if we can stop it quick enough, it might be 5 gallons versus 25 or 30 gallons.
And so I think you can take that line and go through and itemize what your anticipated costs are, but then you can also do a section that says, based on your experience and knowledge of the machine repairs, these are things that typically can go out with an estimated cost that says, additional fluid for the leak that you can't stop, or additional bushings or whatever you might need for the repairs. That way, it's justifying the dollars that are being asked to be put in the line, and that you're using a point of reference to show what has been spent. Because that's part of what comes up on this budget, is that historical information isn't there, and we've moved things around as a county versus identifying the lines and clearly stating, this is how much it costs to operate these 2 groomers at Priest River. We don't have that historical data, so we're trying to build that on the first pass, and really you'll see the positive impact on the next budget cycle, because this one you have to fight for that dollar amount. And then the next one will have the historical data to say, well, we budgeted for gas and gave this much of a cushion, and you used more, so we need a bigger cushion because we had a heavier season, but we don't have that to do it with right now. Until we'll increase the lines of vehicle maintenance and repair. And then I think also, if in this grouping where you see potential for needing another vehicle, it doesn't mean you're going to get it on that budget, but you can put that note in the line that says, we're having vehicle issues, there is going to be a need for a significant overhaul or a replacement, and give an estimate, so that when we're at the next budget cycle, we can see, wait, they've been saying they need a truck and it costs this dollar amount of money, and it's been reported, and it gets archived in the system. And that's part of what the text comment's for.
The county grant match.
So the reason for this, probably number one on our list, if we did a part of our work plan that we do every year, and the things that we really like to do, is we are really trying to seek additional grant money. And usually when there's grant money, it's 10 or 20% that we have to match, okay? And so the biggest thing that we want to do priority-wise is to build more parking lots. And so we got this new Lionhead parking lot. We worked on it 5 years, but with the blessings and help of Idaho Parks and Rec, we were able to do that, build that new parking lot last year. And it was a safety issue. These are always safety issues, and what we're finding now, more and more snowmobiles are ended up parking right along the county road. And so we're trying to get them off the county road. And so we have priorities. We want to build a new parking lot at Indian Creek, and we want to expand the first two and expand the parking lot at Kavanaugh Bay. And so those are one of the things that we were on our wish list to work, and there's a grant cycle that we can apply for a grant in January, and obviously we need match money in order to qualify for that. The other thing that we want to look at, we go out and we actually brush out trails. For some reason at Priest Lake, these trees keep growing. And so we want to protect our machines, and we've got some trails right now that until we can get them brushed out, we won't be grooming the trails because we don't want to damage our equipment. And so one of the things is to get grant money to get equipment where maybe a vehicle that we could transport all our volunteers to those sites and have some additional saws and things that we can actually brush out those trails. So that would be another grant that we could look for. And so there's some great opportunities for that. And so that's why we have this $20,000 match money. If we don't get it, we're not going to spend it, but if we have that opportunity, we don't have to run to the board and say, well, we need $10,000 grant match money that's not in our budget. So that's the reason that we have that in there.
So is the request to pull this out of the current banked contingency funds?
This would be money in the bank that we're asking for. This is the state's money that the county is holding that we want to use as match in January.
Right. So the roughly $100,000, is that, you're talking about the banked funds?
Yeah.
For me, it's not an unreasonable request because of this type of program. It's so funded. It needs in order to do some of the improvements that they need an injection of more funds, and you have to spend funds in order to get funds in this particular scenario. And part of the focus is to help the particular group be independent of general fund. And in order to do that, they need to seek out grants, because we're too small for some things large, and we're too large for some things, and it puts you in a very bad spot when you're trying to achieve grants. So and if they don't receive the opportunity to do a grant match, the money will stay there, so it won't be something that the commissioners have to address of moving that line. But I think they have to be able to seek out grants when they come available, because there's a window. And if they don't do it within the window, then they don't have the opportunity at all.
No, I completely agree. The funds are there because they've been good stewards of the money, and therefore, for them to recognize future needs to keep the program viable and utilize the funds that they've preserved to do it, I mean, that's an automatic yes for me.
Any issue with the $20,000 from you, Commissioner Korn?
No.
So if we could circle back, since we're going line by line and we're at the end of this Priest Lake groomer budget, can we go back to the 6090 salary line? So with the idea of reducing and of making all these line items appropriate, we were asking for the 10,000 in contingency. We're going to make that contingency line item 5,000, and then we're going to distribute the salaries up and the fuel up in $2,500 each. So we'd like to move the budget from 24,252 to $26,752 for salary.
Agreed.
I think we just need to make a note on your salary worksheet for HR so that they would increase the number of hours appropriately. That's what we'll do.
Do you need me to do that, Jessica, or are you adding in?
I will correct it.
And then did you say it was the diesel line that would be?
Yep, and that is the 7010. We'd like to bump it from 15,000 up to 17,500. And then,
We'll go over it.
okay. And then just circling back, I know time is limited here, is back to this 7,700 contingency account, just making sure that we have the $5,000 in there.
So we didn't say 5,000. We were going to look at where that program
Yeah, I
is.
think let's just get together and we'll allocate
Okay.
the funds appropriately.
Because it kind of can wash out a $20,000 grant, but this budget is actually increasing, not going down. And so we need to do a little bit closer look on some of those lines. But the overall, I think that addresses the majority of this particular department. But this is a budget increase, which is the opposite direction. Not that it's not justified, it's just,
I was
wanna make
gonna
sure
say,
before we
maybe it's
add
been
in.
underfunded in the past, but
Well, it's a fee-based, it's a different kind of budget. It's a fee-based budget, and it's how much do you inject from the county
So I think that,
things. And historically, they've not put money into it because kind of the pay-per-use type of ideology is what what has happened in the county.
Correct.
And I think that's where the request is to make a clear decision of, is the county going to help float the program? Yes or no, and what amount will you float that program? Or are they going to be solely dependent on the fees themselves? And I think we've agreed to address some of those issues through general fund. We just have to have some consistency with what it is so that there can be some future planning that can be depended on. And I think that part has to be, we have to figure that number out.
And could you please state what the anticipated user fee revenue is going to be for the coming year? I know it's not finalized yet, but it's been a few weeks since that number was stated.
Yeah, I have that written down. It's in my office, yeah. But we could get a calculator out and
Oh, you don't have it with you? Okay. All right. You just don't have it with you right now?
not right
Total?
this second,
Okay.
yeah.
We'll work on that too.
Yeah. Could you send that to us as an email, please?
Yep.
All right. You good?
Good.
All right, it is 1:14 and this budget workshop is adjourned. So you guys have 15
Thanks, guys.
minutes.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time today.